Let's take a moment to look at recent commentaries of the story by two contemporary, very well-known and respected international authors. One a Protestant, the other a Catholic. J.D.M. Derrett, the Protestant, says that the steward had been making usurious loans without the knowledge of the master. Okay? Thus, the steward gives back the unjust interest, and the master's praise ratifies his decision. Recall that usury, charging interest on a loan, was in the Old Testament sinning against God and the law. What Derrett is proposing is that maybe the steward had been putting interest on the loans forbidden by God. And so what he did was pay back the interest. But there's a problem with Derrett's understanding. Imagine that the steward was forgiving usurious interest, assumes that the interest being charged for oil was 100%, and on wheat was 25%. By no ancient source is there even a suggestion in any interest given in these amounts, even in Egypt where interest was extremely high. In ancient Rome, the interest rate on a loan was 12%, and in ancient Israel, it was 0%. It does not work to try to construe the amount of debt as the debt forgiven as interest on a loan. So bye-bye Derrett. The recently passed away Joseph Fitzmyer, 800-pound gorilla for Aramaic, and he was a wonderful man, actually. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. Was perhaps the leading United States scholar of the Gospel according to Luke in the last century. Like Derrett, Fitzmyer also assumes usurious loans in the parable of the Shrewd Steward, but thinks that the interest was the steward's remuneration, in the deal. You know, he's getting a fee. So when he returns the interest, the managing steward does not damage the master, but forgoes his own profits. Okay? Makes sense. If you're American, it does make sense. Because stewards in our country get paid. Right? Fitzmyer explains this to be a prudent action designed to ingratiate himself with prospective future employers. But there are problems with Fitzmyer's understanding. The story tells how much the debtors owe the master, not the steward. Also, we have no other evidence anywhere in antiquity that a steward was allowed to charge a fee from his master. We have no evidence from anywhere in antiquity that contracts were anything but between a master and a debtor. Agents of the master play no role whatsoever. What about other contemporary Western scholarly commentaries on this parable? Many say that the focus is on the prudent actions of the steward that result in saving him. But think about this. Jesus comes to preach good news to the poor. Did Jesus ever get up and tell his peasant audiences, hey folks, I'd like you all to be prudent? That sound like good news to peasants? That makes no sense. Be prudent may be wisdom, but it is not good news or anything to make starving peasants do somersaults. Right? It's also usually assumed by modern Western scholars. So what I'm trying to show you is that when modern Western people look at the gospel stories, we look at them through Western eyes and Western ideas. And don't think being a Catholic priest or Catholic Bible teacher, myself included, I'm not a priest, but don't think that saves me just because I'm Catholic. Western scholars assume that the steward is dishonest. But that dishonesty is not in prior behavior, but rather in the shocking actions of verses 5 through 7. These verses. He called in his master's debtors one by one. To the first he said, how much do you owe my master? He replied, 100 measures of olive oil. He said to him, here is your promissory note. Sit down and quickly write one for 50. Cancels half of his debt. Then to another he said, and you, how much do you owe? He replied, 100 cores of wheat. He said to him, here's your promissory note. Write down one for 80. Cancels. 20%. In other words, the steward was dishonest in giving away his master's money. But in a little while, we're going to explore why this is not true. Frequently, modern Western commentators on this parable explain that the master's praise is not for his steward's fraudulent actions, but rather for his quick thinking and decisive action. So that would mean that the pre-Paschal Jesus got up and told groups of peasants who were starving to death, listen folks, I want you to be prudent, decisive, and quick thinking. That how Jesus sounds? Huh? It's doubtful that such a sentiment gels with the peasant folk healer Jesus or his gospel. This parable often becomes in modern commentaries an illustration of the kind of resolve and decisiveness required for those to follow Jesus. This understanding has serious problems. One big problem is that it sounds suspiciously like the legitimation of modern United States values. Beware a congenial Jesus. But there's another bigger problem. This understanding imagines Jesus encouraging his listeners to rather crass, self-serving action that is very difficult to reconcile with the rest of Jesus' teachings. It is doubtful then that much of Western scholarship has helped us understand this story. Do we agree?
Yes. Yep.
What's the problem? Lack of intelligence among Western scholars? Western values are the problem. Western values, not that they're bad, all bad. They're a problem because Western values are not Middle Eastern values.
Right. Removed from time.
Once you move the language, you necessarily change the meaning. A moral of today. But that's my punchline point. Okay? We are probably just as lost as Luke himself was when he added the 4 concluding punchlines. We got to start over from scratch.
There's no hope.
No, I didn't say that. Yes, there is. These context group scholars can give us some anthropological, cultural, social, scientific insights. That's where we can begin.